Nicholas McKie is an associate professor and certified professional coach working with individuals, teams, and organisations all over the world to unlock their leadership potential and enhance the quality of educational practice. The director of Pursue, Nicholas, specialises in executive leadership coaching and development with leaders across the education sector. He's the author of Always Coaching, a book on how to create a coaching culture in your school, and his popular podcast, Inspiring Leadership, brings engaging stories from across the world of educational leadership and beyond. So, Nicholas, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alan. Lovely intro, and thank you, Lewis. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Brilliant. Great to have you on. Great to have you on. Now, your career path, it's been rich and diverse. You started out as a professional musician, and then you entered teaching in the UK before going overseas in Japan, Egypt, China, and the US, where you became school principal and an ISI inspector. Tell our listeners, Nicholas, a little bit about that journey, please.
Yeah, it sounds horrific, doesn't it, really? It was an interesting one. Before I went into music, going back a long time, I was heavily into sports and still am really, but I had some operations on my knees. My knees kept dislocating when I was younger. And it's a hereditary thing. My mother had it as well, so we had high kneecaps. So I couldn't play football, couldn't play rugby, did all these things. So I wanted to get my kind of teeth into something else around the age of 14, I think, probably. And went to school and I wanted to play the saxophone because the saxophone was cool, and you're in a jazz band and you could do all these things. And they didn't have a saxophone, and they gave me this case, and it was a bassoon, and I hadn't got a clue what it was. None of my family are musical, but I said okay, so I took it home and tried to put it together. It took me about an hour to do that, and started to play the bassoon. And part of that, which I really enjoyed more than actually practicing the bassoon, was the social aspect of it. So it's playing in orchestras, playing in bands, those kind of things. Went on tours, played for the county music service, and started singing in a choir, all these kind of things. And really enjoyed working with people and socializing and all the rest of it. So then I went to music college as a bassoonist, which I never thought I'd do, and spent 5 years in London, Trinity College of Music. I think it's changed now, gone down to Greenwich. Loved it. Again, more the social side. I think being in a room practicing for hours every day wasn't really my kind of idea of fun at the time. But really enjoyed it and started playing with orchestras. Went over to Macau and played with them for about 4 or 5 months, which again, I really enjoyed. Then I went over to Bombay and played in the Bombay Chamber Orchestra. And I really enjoyed those trips. And I used to try and get little add-ons to the trips to go and travel, do some backpacking either side of those. And really enjoyed going to India 4 or 5 times, meeting some great people. And as part of that, there was a lot of teaching going on. So in Macau, I was going into some of the local schools and doing woodwind workshops. As part of being in Bombay, I was doing some outreach work with street children, etc., and doing some concerts. And in London as well, I was doing some teaching in the borough of Harrow. So I was going around different schools doing Peri teaching. So I got to the stage, maybe a lot of freelancers do, thinking, well, do I want to kind of give my life to the bassoon and have this freelance lifestyle? Well, I don't know how much money's coming in every week, and it's all up in the air. And I thought I've had quite a few years of this, so I stopped and then trained to be a teacher, a music teacher, and started actually in Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, in Bradford, in school in special measures, Queensbury High School. Really enjoyed it. It's one of those schools where you get there and because of all the mist, it's quite high, you can't see the entrance to the school half the year, so you don't actually know where you're going, and all the kids are coming out of the mist. It's all a bit ethereal. And then I went and taught at Brick House High School, and enjoyed that. And then I kind of still doing some traveling, seeing some colleagues abroad, and I got the travel bug. So then I went overseas and taught in Japan, Egypt, China, and the US. Came back to the UK as well as vice principal of an independent school down in Kent. Really enjoyed, went over to the dark side of administration, which I enjoyed, did an MBA at the same time, which is based in Bangkok, which I really loved, met some great people doing that. And then to bring the kind of the story full circle, I suppose, is I kind of got a bit disillusioned with what I was doing. I was really enjoying the personal development, as I've always have done, actually, and the coaching side of things, but it was the more the financial side, or the traveling I was doing from America. I was in Boston at the time, to Southeast Asia, to China, to Central Asia, to Europe, to Russia, So I was just here, there and everywhere doing things. And I'm thinking, I've just had enough of this. So I came to the UK. So I got my coaching qualification in the US, about a year and a half diploma, then came to the UK, started my business Pursue, and started that, been working ever since with school leaders and people all over the world. And got a phone call from the University of Warwick. And they said, "Hi, Nick, we're thinking about starting a PGC international program. Do you want to come and develop it for us?" Oh, that sounds quite interesting. Maybe I can make that work around the coaching and things, which I have done. And first day, turned up, suits, shiny shoes, 7 o'clock in the morning. Had to wait 3.5 hours for anyone else to turn up. Everyone was there kind of, a bit more relaxed. But I've really enjoyed the university side. So I've been working there now for 4 years, built the PGC International program, which is now going great guns, and also heavily involved in IQTS. So that's kind of one side, and again, coaching weaves its way through all of that. And then my business has just gone from strength to strength with coaching and leadership development. So there you have it, Alan and Lewis. That's the journey.
That's where we're at. And you mentioned Pursue there, and I know that today we're going to really focus our conversation around that idea of coaching. Tell us what Pursue does and what coaching is, Nicholas.
So Pursue, initially, I really wanted to support school leaders, because I thought there was a space there, in my experience, that people weren't being supported to do their role. It's a very isolated job, as we all know. And I just thought the role was changing from that of being just purely inward facing to a very outward facing role, multifaceted responsibilities. And I think there was a real niche there for support. With Pursue, we do a couple of things. We do the one-to-one coaching, which I would say, again, kind of alluding to my book here a little bit, is kind of a fundamental domain. So it's one-to-one, potentially non-directive in nature, potentially framed around a coaching model. And it's supporting someone in that safe space where they can kind of jostle with ideas and explore and move through challenges. We also do group coaching, and that is, say, a group of heads of department in a school, or phase leaders, shall we say, who don't have any collective responsibility in terms of producing or delivering something, but who have similar roles. And that is around things like action learning sets. So it's looking at taking times to coach each other, to have that collaboration, to unpick challenges and to jostle with things, to cement that collective understanding in a school. And then I also look at team coaching, where people do have a collective responsibility to deliver something. So they have an identity. So, for example, a school leadership team, having a look around the mission, the values, how they're operating, how they're developing, and how they're working with all the different people that they come into contact with. So those are the kind of coaching things that I do, and you put those together, of course, for a coaching culture, which maybe I can go into a bit more detail in due course. But we also do leadership development packages. So I work with schools doing, say, year-long development packages around developing your leadership skills, your leadership brand, and then again, incorporating coaching into that as well. And the interesting thing is I do work mostly in education, but I also do some work outside of education. So a little bit in more the corporate sense, and looking at some more kind of professional sports now, and picking some of the transitions around players coming in and out of careers and injuries and those kind of things as well.
And when you use that phrase coaching, Nicholas, what do you mean? Give us a definition of that phrase coaching.
Again, there's lots of different definitions depending on what kind of coaching you're talking about. For me, it's a skillful dialogic partnership that's very experimental and reflective. And I think that encompasses a lot of different coaching models, whether it's a one-to-one group or team. I think it is around learning. A basic fundamental definition of coaching is learning rather than teaching. And I think it depends on again, which kind of domain you're talking about in coaching. It's very non-directive. So it's the person's bringing their troubles or their challenges, shall we say, to the table. And they are the expert of their own challenges. And it's the coach's role to frame and to hold that space. I also kind of challenge against that a little bit now and say, the kind of the fallacy of being impartial in any relationship. And if you can ever be non-directive, because you're always bringing your own preconceived ideas to that. So I know there's this big kind of thing about in education, is it coaching where, they have all the answers as a client, or is it mentoring where you're the expert? I think sometimes it's about knowing that continuum and actually settling maybe into a space that you can bring your own knowledge, but as long as you're not getting in the way of someone's values, and, allowing them to move forward. But to get to that stage, I think being non-directive is a very, very good starting point.
Yeah, I was just gonna pick up on that, Nicholas. Well, I don't know if you've seen this book. It's called the Tyranny of Words. We got recommended to us by a guest many months ago, and it's how people interpret the word coaching and the word mentoring. Everybody does have that preconceived idea, what you've just talked about. How do you deal with that, Nicholas? How do you set that out in terms of, like, this is coaching, this is mentoring, and my role in this is this? Do you know what I mean? So it stops any preconceived ideas happening in the first place.
Really, really good question. And I think just before that, one of the key things of coaching, which is always neglected, I find, is contracting.
Okay.
So when you first start coaching, you need to be having the conversations around the questions that you just asked, Alan. So what are we actually doing here? Do you want someone to come in who's an experienced head teacher to look after, say, someone new to a headship because they've done all the things, that they're going to, experience? So, for example, someone on Twitter the other day put, "I'm a new head. Do you don't have a COVID policy?" Now, if you're a head teacher or someone in that role, you will naturally have been experiencing this over the last year and a half. So, of course, you'll be able to mentor and to give advice. A coach can be a fantastic coach, but maybe they're not even in education. So they wouldn't know, they wouldn't have a COVID policy at hand because they haven't, lived and breathed it. So I think with the coaching and mentoring, it's really important at the beginning of a relationship to ascertain exactly what this is about. Do they need this or do they need that?
Right.
I think with mentoring, it is about giving advice. You are the expert. You've been there. You've lived and breathed it. You've seen it. You've done the t-shirt. Coaching is a lot more non-directive. So you don't necessarily have needed to be in that person's shoes. And I remember I went to a conference. I forgot what it was now, but someone said about Barack Obama, and it was it might have been David Clutterbuck, and he said, "I couldn't mentor Barack Obama because I'd never been president of the US." He said, but I could coach him.
Yeah, good. That's a really nice analogy. Like that.
And I thought,
really nice.
Yeah, spot on that. I just cuts to it. So I think it's really important that you ascertain what the person wants. The second thing, Aaron, is in education, we love a model, we love solutions, and we love, getting across problems. Yeah. I would probably say at a certain point, does it matter? Because maybe, and again, this comes on to a different argument, potentially you could argue that the best coaches need a bit of a background in the industry that they're coaching in. And there's definitely, if I go and try and go to a C-suite business, they'll say, "Well, have you gone and done what we've done?" I'll probably say, "No, not in the same way." So they wouldn't be interested. You won't get in the door. But I think in some respects, if you've got a background in education, you're an education coach, if you've got the proper skills, the fundamental skills, and that kind of the way to coach, and you've got experience, and you've got the contracting in place, then maybe sometimes you're going to be coaching because that's what it needs. Other times, maybe you say, no, excuse me, I need to butt in here because this is what some of the things that you need to be looking at doing, or according to so-and-so, have a look at this, or maybe try this book, or have you looked at this opinion? And sometimes it's about going into that more mentoring role, but you just do it because that's what's needed at the time, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to be a coach for the first 10 minutes, then I'm going to be a mentor for this little bit. So I think it's about understanding the continuum and what they are, but then also having the flexibility and the agility within that to move through the different roles.
So almost understanding that they're not two separate things.
Yeah. I think, it's a good question, Lewis. I suppose coming back to the contracting, if you want someone to be a mentor, then maybe that is a little bit different. Because if you want someone who's been there and done it and can give you the policies and give you all the things, and that's solely what you want, that is a mentor. If you want someone maybe who's going to be looking at how you, being less directive and how you're going to develop in your role, maybe that's a little bit of coaching. I think what I'm saying is you can have both in a relationship.
Yeah. So it's very driven by the context. If I'm listening to you correctly, to be non-directive and to have a clear shared perspective on what it is that you're trying to achieve together, but without letting your own knowledge and values influence that conversation and influence where that conversation goes. I think you almost said it, that sometimes you're probably better not having the knowledge of actually what it is that the end product might look like, so that you're in an easier position, so you're not trying to impress upon the person that you're coaching exactly where you think this could go or what the potential to their question or what they're trying to pursue could be.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think it's having an awareness of when you're stepping into certain ways of coaching. So if and we all do it. That's why I said about, the fallacy of being impartial. We'll all have our own kind of, preconceived ways of doing things, but you've got to notice when potentially that you're doing that and to come out of it. And also the key element of contracting. And, if you are going to be giving someone advice, then, ask permission. How would you feel about me giving you a couple of ideas here? Well, actually, Nicholas, at the moment, that'd be a really good idea. Okay, fantastic. So you're actually not saying do this, do that. You're actually giving things open and you're actually framing conversations. Because at some point in a coaching relationship, we've all had it. Someone say, look, Nick, just tell me what to do. Stop asking me questions. I know what you're doing. It's been really coachy, but I've got half an hour. I've got to get back because I've got a governor's meeting. Can we cut to the chase here? So it's those kind of things about, okay, well, it's really interesting that you say that. So how would you want me to tell you about this? Let's say you can get a bit too coachy sometimes. That comes back to the contracting and revisiting. Well, actually, if I tell you what I think you should do, that's what we spoke about in the first session, wasn't it? That you didn't want me to do that.
Yeah.
So if what do you think I'm going to say to you if you ask me, what do you think you should do? It's a very typical coach thing, rather than saying, right, okay, or what would you do in this situation then? What would you tell a friend to do? What would you tell me to do in this situation? But if you've contracted to say that actually they want the input, then you say, actually, Lewis, actually, Alan, do this, or do this. Which one do you think?
So would your default position there, Nicholas, to be to try and give those options? I really like that idea to start with, of asking for permission to give advice. And then once you've asked for permission and you've received that, would your practice be generally to offer options and to offer different ideas of where this could go next? Or would you more often than not suggest something that you feel would be the right thing with the knowledge that you have of that person and the problem that they face?
Again, it's very contextual, isn't it? I think my probably tendency, my default in coaching, it always has been, is to probably be on the more less directive way. And that comes back to, I suppose, linking to my background in teaching. I love workshops. And workshop is about actually teamwork. It's getting the students to actually sort of work it out themselves and to stand back. And I think the key thing actually in a coaching relationship, reminds what you're saying, Lewis, actually, is around dialogue. Now, dialogue's different to conversation. Conversation, you probably know the outcome. Dialogue, you're actually going into the realms of actually, we don't know how this is going to end. We don't know what the end goals of this is going to be. Now, we're always taught in basic coaching models, aren't we, that problem, solution, straight line, and there's no issue around that. That's always going to work. Well, there's some ways that's going to work, other ways it's not. It gets more complex than that, doesn't it? So I suppose in terms of the teaching as well, I was always trying to talk to the students. Well, instead of me telling you this, say in a music work, we just like African drums, for example, I'm actually going to model these things and we're going to organically try and work something out rather than me saying, you do the ostinato pattern there, you start there and you start there. Now, it may need me to be directive sometimes to kickstart things, but as your relationship builds with the students and the class, they'll start to take the lead with things, and you can do things without being explicit. And I think that's very much aligns to a coaching relationship. Things always change, and it's really, really key. Going back to contracting, I know I'm banging the drum on this, but that you come back and you revisit. So at the end of each session, I will have a review. Okay, so how did this session go for you? How did you feel when I challenged you? What would make you feel a bit more challenged? When I said that, how did it make you feel? What should I do more of? What should I do less of? How helpful has this been? So you're always gauging that relationship with someone in the same way, really, with teaching, you'd always do that kind of formative assessment, wouldn't you? To see actually where students are and where they are in the learning. Have you lost them? Has it been impactful, etc.?
Yeah, two massive takeaways on contracting and asking permission to give advice. I absolutely love that, and I certainly take that forward in my leadership, Nicholas. Thank you for sharing those. I just want to explore that in a bit more depth. And can you have a coaching relationship without really knowing that person first, or does that just happen organically as part of the coaching process?
Again, really good question. There's some, therapy. I think it's called single session therapy, and there's been some work done on that. And it's awful. I've forgotten the name of the person who did some research on it, but I can give you an email around it. But they found out that actually having a single session, say an hour session, on its own in isolation can have real impact. So that you wouldn't know the person before the session of therapy. You probably wouldn't, on the premise that you wouldn't have any more sessions, and that still have some impact. So I think in coaching, we're always told you must have, say, 12 sessions. It must be done over a long period of time. And I think sometimes we have to challenge that a little bit and say, well, actually, do we? I would probably say, and again, if you put me on the spot, I think you build a relationship with somebody. I also think coaching is about making yourself redundant. And what sits underneath coaching really is self-responsibility. So if you're having to coach someone for 5 or 6 years over the same things, I'd probably ask the question: when do you kind of let go a little bit and say, right, we've done this. You really know the answers in a typical coaching way. You've got all the answers within you. You know this. And I think what's really interesting with the people that I have for a longer period of time is to say, when they're in a situation, they'll say, what would Nick say? What would I say to Nick in this situation? So that they're self-coaching, rather than having to pick up the phone to me every 5 minutes and say, well, actually, Nick, I've got this and I've got this. What do you think I should do? So I think, yes, come back to your question. I think relationships are really, really important. Some people, a longer relationship works really, really well. Some people, I say, want it short and sharp, and you could have a couple of sessions and that's all they need, and off they go again. So you don't have to have that relationship before. With a caveat, again, this is a typical coaching training thing as well, is I think it's quite difficult to coach people that you're close to, friends, family, people that you're working with. There's always power dynamics at play, isn't there? And especially in schools, the most political of places at the best of times. So I think it's very difficult for someone to, if you're coaching someone in a relationship, for them to truly open up if you've got that power dynamic at play, like a line manager, for example. And also, if you've got a friend, it's very, very difficult to be impartial if you know all the people who are linked to this issue, and you're going to have your own opinions on it because you're so close to it. Very, very difficult to do that and to stand back and support the person without getting involved yourself.
So that's an interesting concept there, because the coaching models are promoted in schools. And Lewis, you said earlier, you've been going through coaching models. Now, we have close relationships with the people we work with. So then how do we, you're talking about power dynamics, is a coaching model the right model to use then in schools if you're trying to develop relationships, but you're suggesting that doesn't work with power dynamics? How does that work then, Nicholas?
Yeah, and I think, it depends on the coaching that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I would actually say, and again, maybe this is a bit controversial, but it's very difficult. I'd probably know very few schools where you could have the head teacher, say, coaching someone in their leadership team, and the person, and again, it depends on the school, but I think generally here, the person in that leadership team feeling really, really having a psychological safety to open up about everything.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then, because there are power dynamics at play, and there are some schools that you'd be able to do that, and you've got great relationships with people, but I think there are some power dynamics at play between, if you're line managing, if you're renewing people's contracts, if money comes at play, etc. How far do you open up? But then, how far do you need to open up? So maybe if it's like an instructional coaching, if you're looking at feedback using coaching methodology or coaching models to give feedback on lessons, that's in a professional sense. You're not taking a deep dive into the personal issues or the kind of deeper things that someone's talking about, and that's fine. The work that I do with head teachers, I would say 9 times out of 10, the personal comes in pretty quickly, because they don't have somebody in the school potentially who they can open up to about some of the things that they're going through, whether it's professionally and personally. Where's their safe space? Do they go to the governors? It depends on the relationship. Do they go in front of the staff and sort of be really, really vulnerable about certain things? Or maybe that's not professional enough to do that, or that maybe they don't want to do that. So how can they kind of engage in coaching if it's very, 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 very difficult in that sense? So I think it depends on the nature of the coaching. If you're doing team coaching, so if I'm going into a school and looking at mission and how the team's working, again, if you get the head teacher, and again, generalizing here, but as an example, you get the head teacher to lead that, there's going to be some power dynamics at play, because there's going to be certain things that people may not want to say to people. You know, how honest can you be with the head teacher when they're sitting next to you? And in some schools, very honest, other schools, no. So if you get somebody from the outside coming to facilitate these things, it takes that out to play. And again, coming back to the contracting, what we said at Alan is around about this is, okay, if we have someone who wants to say something honest, that's going to potentially annoy someone in the senior team, how are we going to deal with that? What's that going to look like? How do you want that to be managed? And I think that's really, really, you know, a nuanced way of coaching, because you've got lots of different people with different agendas coming together. So I think it's the nature of the coaching. You can use coaching methodology in teaching. You can use it in your performance development. You can use it across school, and you can use it. You know, some people will feel very, very comfortable talking about certain things. Other people won't in school, because that's just a job to them, and they want to leave and they'll have a different life. So it's about gauging the purpose for why you're doing the coaching, and also making it safe so people don't feel that they need to kind of, as some people have said to me, kind of get on the couch with your line manager and spill everything that's going on in your life, you know.
How do you, as a coach, Nicholas, handle that emotional or personal side of it? So I suppose the question is, where's the line in terms of empathy between being professional and listening and coaching, and then, you know, taking on other people's concerns and issues, and that really bothering you as a coach? Because we're all human. You know, you seem a very empathetic person, and there must be times that's been tough.
Yeah, and it's the same with head teachers, isn't it? I mean, I'll talk about head teachers first and come to Milos, because heads are telling me all the time, I'm up to here with being empathetic. You know, I've kind of got to the end of it over the last year and a half. You know, I'm a really giving person, everything else, but I can't take on everyone's issues and function, because it's starting to get on top of me. You know, I've got issues of my own, and especially, you know, during the last year and a half with the lockdowns, all these kind of things, as we all know, it's been extremely difficult, especially internationally. People have been away from families. These, you know, it's been very, very difficult. So I think you can get to a certain stage where you all empathized out, as people tell me. I think with coaching, I think it's really beneficial for me to speak to somebody else. So I have a coach. And I know that people who do, again, going back to therapy, I had a fantastic lady actually come into, she's a musical therapist, and she came in to work with some music trainees a few years ago. And she was working in female prisons and in hospitals as well with young kids, the musical therapy. And she says part of her job, she had to have, I think it was monthly touch bases with another therapist, because of the amount of stuff that you take on and you don't realize. And I think sometimes as coaches, you don't realize the impact these things are having on you. So I think it's really good for you yourself to have a support system, or a mental wealth system, whatever you want to call it, of people that you can talk to, other coaches, maybe networks, and just making sure you've got the right people around you to have that space where you come out, reflect, jostle with some things that other coaches are going through, and kind of talk through things. Because again, over the last year and a half, I know a lot of coaches have found, you know, there's been some quite deep and quite you know, upset people that they're working with, understandably, and that can, you know, take its toll.
Two things there, Nicholas. Empathized out, love that phrase. And mental wealth system, not heard that one before. Really nice. Head teaching and leadership, I think, is a lonely place, isn't it? And I know Lewis and I on our different leadership paths, and we know head teachers very well within our schools. And yes, you're entirely right. Who do they go to? Who are their people that they can lay their problems at the door at? Because they have to be everybody's support network, don't they? And they have to be the all singing, all dancing. They have to be everything to everybody. So is it absolutely essential for us guys on that pathway to have a support network in place?
Yes.
If we don't have an external coach, or we don't have the finance available to do that, give us some examples of who we could go to in these situations that they might not have the expertise, but you might be able to offload.
I think it's finding a person that you're comfortable with, Alan, really. And I think that's different people, you know, different people for different people. So some people, and I know when I was in international, you know, and you guys know this very, very well, it's very, very close knit, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
the people that you work with, you're thrown together very quickly. They become a family. Now, there's good bits to that and there's bad bits to that. So I think it's about making sure that people that you're working with, or you've got someone that you work with, because head teachers get very stressed out. I would say, teachers get stressed out in exactly the same way. We're all people. So I think as a teacher, if you're going through a difficult time, who in the school can you go to? Who can you, is it someone, is it a peer that you can talk to? Is it your head of department, that you feel comfortable doing that? Is it somebody else? Is it maybe someone from a different school in the same city? Is it someone outside, maybe a club that you've joined? Whatever it is it your family, your friends, whatever it is, to try and get someone that you feel comfortable with. On the flip side of that, I've also known people who are kind of, again, the designated person. They're not a coach, but everyone comes to them and offloads to them. And then they get dragged down with things as well. And they say, well, actually, that's getting on top of me. I'm not employed to be a coach or anything else. But everyone keeps coming to me because I listen. So I think there are times to say, I really want to help, but now's not the right time. So how about you come back this time, and I just need a bit of space. So it's about whoever you're comfortable with. If you haven't got an external coach that you can feel you can have conversations with.
Do you think, Nicholas, there's signs and symptoms of recognizing maybe when one of your leadership colleagues might need to go and have this offload or this designated person? Or is it just on a very individual basis? Or would you even feel comfortable recommending that to a colleague, or would they see that as a sign of weakness? Just trying to throw things out there from what's going on in my head at the moment.
If I look at my own personal experience, excuse me, you get two in the job. So I think anyone, if anyone's a telltale sign, as we all know, if you're getting to work early, if you're leaving really, really late, that some people, that's fine. That's the way they are. And that doesn't mean that they're stressed. That's just the way that they are, and I think we shouldn't try and say just because you're working late or early that you've got an issue, because, that's fine. I think it's when people, you're looking at the personality. So are they still being, chipper around the place? Are they still talking about things that they're doing in a way that's enthused? Are they going a little bit quiet? Aren't they talking about maybe things? Are they just kind of going into their shell a little bit? So I think all that, we're really good in schools looking for these things in students. How many safeguarding stuff, and again, understandably, do we go on all the time about safeguarding, child protection, prevent training, all these things that we do in schools to notice signs in students? It's exactly the same in adults, exactly the same. We're all people. So I think you take those key elements that you look for in children around things like maybe neglect. People aren't dressing the way that they were. They're not, maybe, I don't know. I suppose we're all unshaven here, aren't we? But maybe they used to being clean shaven. Now they're unshaven, and maybe they're not. So there's an odor around. All these things that you would do in students, I think, is very emblematic of someone maybe not coping at that time.
It's a really good point, and we've done safeguarding training over the last couple of weeks. Been back in school. Yeah, it's all about the kids, and yeah, we've all probably been in schools where we've had staff that are in need of this, and we put kids first as we should. But yeah, maybe there should be that network in there for the staff to have the same procedures in place. I don't know about you, Lewis. What do you think about that?
Safeguarding staff, yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? We're told all the time around looking after your well-being, and I'm a big advocate for nobody else is responsible for your own well-being other than you yourself. And all the people can do is to support and provide different tools, programs, opportunities for you to take or not to take, but nobody knows you as well as you do. And I think trying to bring that to the fore and allow teachers to put themselves first and be in a position where if a teacher feels comfortable, that benefit is obviously going to be reaped by the students that they're leading. And I completely agree with Nicholas on that. You can see that happening. We've all seen it. You only need to take a photo of a teacher on day one of the term compared to the last day, don't you? And you can see that it happens, and we joke about it, but it is a sad state of affairs, because we know we throw ourselves into this job. We also know that we make mistakes, and there's an emotional sort of chain that also will drag us down eventually. So it's just trying to find ways of doing that. And I think it leads on to a question for me, Nicholas, really around, obviously, the context in terms of coaching is what's important here, and you're going to have lots of different conversations with people in different contexts. But do you find yourself giving out a similar piece of advice quite often? Or are there a couple of things that you often do talk around in very similar ways, regardless of the person that you speak to?
It's a good question, Lewis. It's around awareness. I remember I look back at some of the photographs of me at the end of a term. There's one particularly, I was deputy head of a school in China. And I look back at it now and I think, you look awful, you look ill. And I look, I had bags under my eyes. I just looked drawn. I was not in a good place. And you don't realize it when you're in it, do you? No one does, because you're in it and it's the end of the term. And I remember just thinking, looking back, that's just awful, absolutely awful. And you kind of think it's about awareness. So one thing that I think is a good idea, coming back to coaching and how can what can help people, is if you've got people that you're buddying up with in your school at the beginning of a term, a good way to sort of start things using coaching is to sort of think, okay, over this term, what are some of the things that I need to do to enable me to be teach, to come to work, to be a person in a good way? What do I need? Now that's different for different people. So a lovely way of induction for me, I need to swim. I love swimming. It's the only probably exercise that I do, that I leave the pool, my body feels great, but my mind's completely clear. I can go into the gym, never get that. I go cycling, never get that. For swimming, that's me. So I know when I'm in a good place, I'm swimming a couple of times a week. I'm doing a couple of miles a week. Now I can't always do that, and I don't get het up if I can't do it, but I know generally that's kind of one of the things I need to do. I also am quite a creative person. So I know really that I need to be doing something creative, whether that's singing, whether that's playing the piano, whether that's writing. I'm not a massive writer, to be honest, but something like that, using my hands and doing something. When I'm at my best, I'm doing something like that. I also like going out and watching rugby. So the Six Nations or something, meeting a couple of friends, having a couple of nice pints of real ale, brilliant.
None of that common lager stuff.
And I want a glass with a handle. Yeah. And I want a nice kind of head in it, about, just over an inch, which in Yorkshire they'd send back, but I'm quite happy with that. But so that, I know these things. I know these things about me. So I think if you don't know the things that make you tick and that you need, that's up to you to unpick. So at the beginning of the year, you work with a buddy in your school, whoever it is. You could use some coaching methodology. If you want to use a model, you can use a model. If you want to set some targets around it, I'm going to be swimming, say, on average, twice a week over a month, whatever you want to do, how sharp they are. And then throughout the term, have you kind of touch bases. So as part of a staff CPD, have half an hour of that, of those person getting together. Okay, how are you doing in relation to these targets you set about going swimming twice a week? Well, actually, you know what, Nick, I haven't done any. Okay, so what do you think? What's stopping you from doing those? Well, actually, maybe this. Okay, so how can we get around that? And then reprioritizing. Because I think it's about being preventative. And what we do all the time is we say we're going to do things. And this is why I think, the days of a one-day CPD are gone. They've been gone for a long time. When you do one thing at the beginning of the year, great ideas, fantastic. You never implement them because life gets in the way. And at the end of the year, or maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, you leave your office and you think, oh, that's a fantastic piece of CPD that I never ever used. So it's about having that continuous, sustainable kind of touch bases with somebody. So to come back to your question, Lewis, it's about self-awareness, whether it's leadership in any form. Have the self-awareness at the beginning of the year or whenever, but as an example, at the beginning of the year, have your check-ins, see how you're doing, testing the temperature to keep you aware of the way that you're actually living.
I absolutely love that. And I've just been doing inset in the last week, and I wish I'd have heard that. I wish I could have done a little session around that. But I think, as you just said there, I think I'm going to build that into part of our wellbeing framework without a shadow of a doubt. It's almost like a personal non-negotiable. And we all have them. I know mine's very similar, Nicholas. I need to exercise. I need to have time to read books. I need to have time to just get out into fresh air and in with nature. But in the last week, I've done none of them things because I've been trying to get helping to get a school open. So that just made me reflect straight away on that. Absolutely, just checking in points, someone checking up on me, and it's a brilliant takeaway again for this episode. What will be those key things? If I continue to not do those things, what's going to happen to me?
Well, just to come back to what you said, Alan, first of all, everyone goes on about work-life balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe any of that.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, because what you've just said, Alan, is typical of what I hear from people. So coming back to Lewis's question of things that I hear from people, not just leaders, but people that I coach, because they haven't done what they would have liked to do in that week. They start to get stressed. Oh, I haven't got balance.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're looking at this over the course of a longer period. So this week, your school started. Your focus has been on your work, understandably, because you need to get certain things in place, and that's okay, because that's what is needed.
Yeah.
When things settle down a bit, maybe that will change a little bit. The issue comes is if you're operating as you're doing now for the next 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So let's not stress ourselves out with having this kind of conversation. We have to have equilibrium all the time.
I think that's so true, and you can use the same pattern, analogy, concept of balance if it comes to healthy eating, losing weight. It's not about what you eat in one specific day, it's about consistency over the course of the year. And I think that brings it back towards that sort of idea of well-being being somebody's responsibility. I think that ties in really well with that idea of self-awareness and understanding what you need, and then understanding that yes, you are accountable for that. I can see that sign above Alan's head, you make it happen. Of course, no one else is, but there are going to be days where, that plan goes out the window because it's just one of those days. There's going to be weeks like that. There might be a month like that every now and again, depending on what it is that's happening in your life at that time. And I think this makes the whole sort of coaching idea clearer to me in terms of you need that person to bounce ideas off and thoughts off, just to keep that perspective and to keep that understanding of what the consistency is to you, and to not get into that cycle where it is week after week after week where it isn't being done, month after month after month where it isn't being done.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Lewis. Totally agree with everything that you said there. I suppose to come back to your question now, and let me ask you a question. What are some of the things that you need in order to kind of be on top of things and to feel good? You mentioned the reading, you mentioned activities, and you've been physical.
Yeah, reading, exercise. I need to get out in outdoor, in nature, really. And it's funny because a lot of that will depend on where you live. I mean, we live in the desert, and at the moment it's 45 degrees. So the outdoor stuff doesn't really happen until sort of October time. So you're almost have these pockets of time when you can go and get that, and then you can get that in the summer when you can got the Peak District on our doorstep. So you sort of work in these chunks, don't you? And teachers in particular, you're working in sort of 6 to 8 week blocks, and it's about having that, trying to being realistic and fitting in those exercise portions, as Louis said, when you can, and accepting that it might not happen this day because I am super busy, and that's okay. But just having that awareness to bring it back to it, and not moaning that I haven't done my exercise, I'm going to be a grumpy sod. do you know what I mean? And I think that's really good for me to have heard that, to realize that I can't have it what I want all the time. I just have to deal with the situation that's in front of me.
Or you get up earlier in the day and you go and do your exercise.
Yeah, well, where's my other? I've got my other book here. Where is it?
He's off. We've lost him.
This one, the Atomic Habits.
I've just finished that. I read it a while ago, but I really enjoyed reading that.
That's an interesting one.
The second one, Nicholas, the 5 a.m. Club.
Oh, I like Robin Sharma, yeah.
Alan, you've got all the answers here, mate. You just need a coach to be able to talk through it and work it out.
Just to unlock it all. It's all in my brain, scrambled.
Tell you what, though, Alan, I think you've answered your own question there, because you said if you didn't do those, you probably feel quite heads up if you're not doing your exercise.
Yeah.
So you know already what you need to be doing. If you can't do it for whatever day, then okay, that's fine. Don't give yourself a hard time. But also there needs to be a little bit of commitment, not to about you, Alan, but generally, if you want to be doing something, you've got to try maybe and prioritize certain things. And as teachers, again, I never subscribed to this idea that you need to put students first when I was leading schools. I thought it's always staff first for me. Because if you get the staff right and everything else, and the culture comes and everyone's doing it, the students are going to have a great time. and the students are going to be looked after well. What we don't want is people so tired that they start missing things and the whole thing, sort of goes down. So I think it's really, really important that you kind of prioritize what you need to prioritize if you can. If you have a day off, that's fine. But, don't put you on the back burner for everyone else. So I think, going back to Lewis's question again, if it's, say, head teachers, the one thing that I hear all the time is, I'm sacrificing myself for everyone else. I feel guilty if I put a free slot in my timetable, or if I say I'm not available, I feel guilty because I need to be there on it all the time. And it's like, well, that's why you can't get your job done. Open door policy. It's all, you read all the books when I became, in senior leadership, have the open door policy all the time. It was great. I remember I was a vice principal down in Kent, and I probably had a queue of 20 people outside my door all the time because I had an open door policy. Couldn't get anything done, and I was getting stressed. It also told me that things aren't right if I've got 20 people at my door all the time. So my door is always open unless it's closed. If it's closed, there's a good reason why it's closed. And I think I needed that time to have some space to get my thoughts together. And I think head teachers and senior leaders, really, really common, because they feel guilty for doing that. So they don't do that. And the upshot is everything gets on top of them.
Yeah, I like that. The door is always open unless it's closed. Yeah, you do hear it. I've heard it many, many times in my career that we've got an open door policy. It's funny because one of my head teacher now, Helen Olds, who's been on the podcast, and she says, yeah, I've got an open door policy, but you've got to get through my PA first, who's an absolute Rottweiler. So I quite like that one as well.
But it's all around boundaries, isn't it? What you're talking about there, Nicholas, of just creating those boundaries for yourself without feeling guilty or without feeling like you're letting other people down. And would that be another reason why sharing those feelings with somebody else in something such as coaching would be really useful, just to check yourself that you have those boundaries and that you are being reasonable?
Yeah, exactly right. And it comes back to what I said before, it's about what do you need to be doing to make yourself, be you, really, because we all know life's precocious. We know teaching is an all-encompassing thing, but it shouldn't be impacting you to a stage where you can't function. Any job, really. There'll be times when it's maybe uber stressful, but then you come down again, and it shouldn't be at that height all the time. And I think if you've got someone that you can talk to, if you've got, say, little, learning sets or coaching sets in your school where you can use coaching methodology, talk through things, have those touch bases so that you kind of have that awareness of where you are. I think that can be so beneficial. That doesn't have to be you talking about, okay, my wife, husband, partner has done this and done that, all these kinds. It doesn't have to be that. It can be something quite simple, leave it up to the person to sort of talk about whatever they feel comfortable with. But I think if people are talking about those things, I think it's really important. The caveat again, and I know I'm going backwards and forwards on a lot of these things. I remember doing some coaching training at a school, and we're talking about this, and one of the teachers stood up and she went, if we are all kind of offloading things, you're opening up so many cans of worms, so much emotion in a school. And I think the question was, how are you going to, what's the danger of doing that? If you suddenly have everyone talking about their personal issues and everything else, she said, especially at the same time in a CPD, I said, the roof could be lifted off the school. And I think it's about, again, how you kind of contract and manage that process. So, maybe it takes a bit of scaffolding to use a teaching term. These are some of the things that we want, maybe that you could be talking about to start with. So maybe you could be modeling some of the stuff. So you're starting off at small steps. So maybe it could be around, you've got some feedback, or there's a bit in the school about workload. So maybe you want the coaching to start around how maybe some ideas or some issues around workload. Let's have a discussion here. Talk to the person, some coaching around workload. How do you go about doing that? Maybe some ways that you can improve, some challenges. So that it's not just an open kind of thing. It's like going to a class, isn't it? And asking an open-ended question to the whole class. You're going to get everyone shouting back. Sometimes we need to be kind of doing it in smaller chunks, especially when you're starting new initiatives.
Yeah, I resonate. So I was just thinking about where you have a meeting and you say, well, has anybody got anything to add? Anything to add? He's like, boom, 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 boom. Or has anybody got any problems? Or have you got anybody got anything that can help you with? It's so open-ended. You just get bombarded with it, and maybe that bit of scaffolding would actually be better. Yeah, I fully agree. we're going to wind it down a bit now, Nicholas. We like to have some fun at the end with what we do. My personal favourite is three leaders in world history who you'd like to go out for a meal with and give us a bit of an insight of what you talk about. Would it be a coaching conversation from you?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, I'm not one of these people who looks back at these kind of great world leaders, really, Aaron. I suppose one person who I've always thought was fantastic, and again, going back to my sporting thing, was Martin Johnson for rugby.
Yeah.
And you've always got that image of him lifting the World Cup. And I was lucky enough to meet him a couple of months ago. And I was a bit awestruck, with him, really. And I don't know what I was expecting him to say when I said, "Hi, Martin, nice to meet you." I don't know. I was expecting him to come out with just something that would make, send chills down my spine. He went, "All right, mate, how you doing?" And that was, "Oh, great. Okay, fine." Brilliant. And I was still, in awe. I think the thing that I liked about him that resonated, and I would love to have a chat with him, that he wasn't a massive talker.
Mm.
He was one of these people that apparently from reading books that he never asked people to do something he didn't do himself. He was hard and uncompromising, and he was in the midst of it, doing what he needed to be doing. And I think that really resonates with me. He wasn't in his ivory towers. He was right in the middle of the scrum. He was right in the middle of everything, a driving line out a mall, to use some rugby terminology, but he was right in the middle of it. And I think he just had this kind of aura about him that he made people better. He made people feel safe. I remember Johnny Wilkinson said, I felt safe walking on the pitch with him. And when someone has that, making people feel safe and making people, look up to them, I think without saying anything, I think that's fantastic leadership. So that's something that comes to mind. I suppose that a similar person is, Jurgen Klopp, isn't it? That's the kind of person that you'd probably like to be coached by in football. Gets the best team, not the most technical guy, as is admitted, but gets the best team around him and very, very good empathy. But one of the big kind of things in my life, I remember my old music teacher, her name was Julie Shaw. And she had a massive impact on me, the way she kind of led music. And I think it was more, it's the aid or adage, isn't it? I don't remember a thing that she said. Yeah, but I remember how she made me feel.
Yeah, brilliant.
And she used to take the choirs everywhere. She used to give us so much autonomy. We go, okay, she used to say, I remember one of the things that she said, because I was actually doing it. You choose how we're going to be set up in the choir. So, you take the chairs out there. You if you want to be there, so essentially she was coaching. Where do you think you should be sitting in this kind of thing? We're only kind of, 11, 12. And she had this wonderful warmth. But then she switched, if she needed to switch, into game mode. I just think that she had this massive kind of, I don't know. I still think about it quite a lot now. Actually, the older I get, the more I kind of think about it. So I'd like to have a meal with Martin Johnson. I think someone like Julie Shaw, an old teacher, I would love to have a chat with.
Have you ever been in touch with her again, Nicholas? It'd be an interesting conversation.
I haven't actually, no. Haven't, and I know she used to work in Botswana. Wow. So again, she came back, and maybe that was something else. She came back, and we were learning all these different songs, and she was getting us to move and things, which at that age you hadn't quite got. You didn't really care, did you? You still kind of you thought you had it. Still, you were moving and grooving, all together. And she brought maybe some different ideas, which motivated us. So yeah, I'd love to have a chat with her, because I'm sure that her travels and everything else would be really, really interesting.
The power of role models in school, Lewis, unbelievable.
I like that the story that you told there about that switch as well, from going from a real warm, fun person. I think I can picture Mrs. Shaw, and then to write game mode. Everybody knows what they're doing, let's crack on. And the power that would have on a group of children to see that switch from feeling safe, warm, happy to, right, okay, now it's time to perform. And she's put us in a position where we felt safe, warm and happy for long enough that when these short, sharp bursts of performance are required, we can do that. And we're going to do it for her. That's a really nice way of putting it.
I think that, sorry, Liz, I think that just comes back to, again, my mother is from Scarborough. My grandmother was from Jarrow.
Beautiful part of the
world. My grandfather's from Scarborough. So there's a lot of family on that northeast coast. You know, my grandmother was brought, it was one of 8 or 9. She was, you know, her mother died very young. She brought the family at the age of 12. You know, it was hard. And I know there's a little bit of something of those things in me. And the older I get, the more I feel that, you know, I'm 43 now, and you're kind of thinking, well, let's have a look at my background a little bit more, you know, that you don't really care when you get younger. So I had to be careful when I'm coaching. Maybe that idea of, as you said, Julie Shaw, switching and being right game face, that kind of appeals maybe to some side of me, because that's my kind of background of maybe the way I've been brought up, some of my values, fairness, hard work, whatever it is, whatever it is for different people. Those preconceived ideas I bring to coaching sometimes. So I've actually said to people, I don't think I'm the right coach for you, because I just think that at this moment in time, you know, I kind of pride myself. You could drop me anywhere and I get on with people. And I think that's, you know, I pride myself on that's been my experience. When you've been internationally, you kind of learn to do that, don't you? Yeah. But I think sometimes there's the right person at the right time. In the same way, Julie Shaw was the right person for me when I was going into music. I'm not always the right person to coach someone at that point in time.
And that comes right back around to the self-awareness that you mentioned earlier of knowing yourself well enough and your history well enough. That really resonates with me, that sort of idea of autoethnography, if you like, of at the minute I'm doing a lot of work researching, or I was over the summer researching, you know, my family tree and my family's roots and things, and that's just been absolutely eye-opening, wonderful, absolutely wonderful, in just trying to trace back how are you the person that you are, what made that, what was that journey like, and you know, even just with a small touch that I've done so far, the things that you find and read about and the people you connect with is just outstanding. It's a really cool thing to do. Nicholas, last one for the quick fire questions. How do you cheer yourself up on the down days? What's your go-to thing?
Exercise. I also like to watch things like you know, these it's just laughing, isn't it? So it's connecting with people who make me laugh, and also like outtakes. So I've been watching over the summer when I've been working, doing a little bit. So like Ricky Gervais outtakes and things like when things go wrong, you know, it's the real stuff, and just that just tickles me.
Can't beat a good laugh, can you?
Even if you don't think the scene's very funny, Ricky Gervais gets so emotionally involved in his laughter, and he enjoys it so much you can't help but laugh, can you?
I watched what was the one when he was, I thought it was fantastic in it. He was in this old people's home.
Derek,
that was it. And I was watching some outtakes of that, and the other week actually, when I was having a bit of a down day, and that was just brilliant. I was crying with laughter, and after that I was thought, okay, just get over yourself, and you know, life's not bad, you know, come on, let's get some clarity, and I just got on with things.
That's it.
A bit of Peter Kay on. Pour a bit of Peter Kay on, and you can't just fail to lift your day. That's my go-to.
It's a very British thing to do, and if you feel a bit down, put something on that'll make you laugh and get on with it.
Better only fools and horses or something like that. That's a great show.
That'd probably be my go-to if that was the case. Nicholas, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I know that your book is out now. Do you want to spend a few minutes telling us about where that is, where people can find it, and what that covers?
Yeah, I'll just show it now. It's called Always Coaching, and it's a little bit of a kind of well, first of all, it's about how to create a coaching culture in your school. And it's the first part is a blueprint, a roadmap of how to do that. As I mentioned before, through 3 domains: a fundamental domain, the systemic domain, and the transformative domain. And just giving you schools an idea, individuals or schools, about a bit of a structure to go towards a coaching culture, because we heard a lot about it, but I don't think that, you know, there's much out there about how to do it. And it links really with my journey about how I've kind of gone about coaching from my background with teaching and everything else. So there's 3 domains, and then at the end it talks about how you can create a coaching culture, and that's part 1. And then part 2 is about a coaching way of teaching. So it's looking at formal, informal, and non-formal learning paradigms and how coaching weaves its way around that. So drawing on part 1 and part 3 is a coaching way of leading. So again, drawing on those 3 coaching domains framed around awareness, relationships, and agility. to see how, it's a coaching way of leading. So it's a book that's for all teachers, school leaders to have a look at if they want to implement coaching in their setting.
Super. And you can get it on Amazon through your website. Where else?
Get it on Amazon. There's always coaching on a hard copy and Kindle, and you can also get it on my website, pursue.com, PERSYOU.com, where you can also find out more information on coaching and what I do.
Fantastic. We'll also put a link to Nicholas's book, Always Coaching, on our website, theinfinitelearners.com. So if you can't find it, do go on there, and we can make sure that you're linked into that. So Nicholas, thanks. Absolute pleasure to chat to you. Really, really enjoyed it. Have a wonderful time ahead, and good luck with all that comes with the book and everything that follows.
Thanks, Lewis, and thanks, Alan. Really enjoyed speaking to you. And yeah, I really enjoyed the podcast. So best of luck with that going forward as well.
Thanks, Nick.